Hello there and welcome back to some more Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Today we're continuing on Let's Play. This is episode 8, and in today's episode we are taking a look at everyone's favourite side mission, Paramedic. Yes, the dreaded Paramedic side mission, a staple of the 3D GTA games. It's now time to attempt this for the second time. Of course we did it in GTA 3, so now we have to do it ahead in this game. There are a couple of caveats to this one. Number one, this mission is a little bit easier in GTA 3. It still has not got the checkpoint system that Vice City Stories would introduce, which would be just simply make every side mission a hell of a lot better. And it certainly should still be feared, but there are a few things that do make it a little bit easier. For one, there is now 4 hospitals in the entirety of Vice City. There is one in Ocean Beach, one in Vice Point, one in downtown, and one in Little Havana. That does make this a little bit easier. It also cuts sections of the map off. So for example, if you start the Ocean Beach Paramedic, you will not have to travel into Vice Point. Don't get me wrong, you still have to go fair distances, but by doing it this way they've made it a little bit easier. It's not like in Liberty City where essentially you have to traverse the entirety of Portland or the entirety of Staunton or, dear God, the entirety of Shoreside Vale. Another thing that makes this notably easier over GTA 3 is that you can do this at any time. While there are certain gangs that will come to hate you later on in the game, there is not quite as much worry about that in this game. This isn't, you know, where you can't do the paramedic side mission outside of Portland right at the start of the game, because otherwise you'll be, I don't know, shotgunned to death by the Mafia, or AK'd to death by the Colombian cartel, or annoyed to death by those bastard Yankees. Yeah, no, there is none of that sort of stuff going on here, which is... or Yardies, I should say, not Yankees. So, not Americans, I mean, I guess. Anyways, yeah, no, there is none of that annoyance. However, there are still a few annoyances. You can't leave the ambulance, you can't exchange your ambulance for a new one, you can't get your ambulance repaired. So I do recommend learning how to drive safely a little bit. You might see me during this. I have the sirens on, but even with the sirens on, I am very cautiously approaching other cars. I'm trying not to hit them. I'm trying not to hit pedestrians so I don't get police wanted stars, so they don't drag me out of the ambulance and finish the mission. Another advantage over GTA 3 for Vice City is the ambulance is a little bit better to drive. It's not quite as ridiculously top heavy as the GTA 3 ambulance, because that was an absolute bloody nightmare trying to drive that thing. Just not fun. Don't recommend it. And also, thankfully, Vice City isn't quite as hilly as the streets of Portland were, so it does make it a little bit easier. Also, you get seconds added for patients in the ambulance. I can't quite remember in GTA 3 if you got the same thing, but either you didn't, because I remember the GTA 3 time limit being quite harsh, or you got less time. Time isn't so much a concern in this version of Paramedic. It still does become a little bit of a worry in the mid-levels, but I actually find the later levels are a little bit easier when it comes to the time, because they do give you a few more seconds, and they are a little bit more generous in terms of the time limit, which is nice. It only took one attempt this time round, which is nice, unlike in GTA 3 where I think I tried 2 or 3 times on a live stream to do it. This time I just managed to bang this out in about 40 to 50 minutes. It is a long side mission. You do need to keep your wits about you, you do need to remember it takes a while, and also again you do need to remember that if you get dragged out of the ambulance or anything of the sort, then that could fail. Again, probably the most irritating side mission in Vice City. I'm trying to think if there's any other. There are a few others that can get tedious. One of the longest, Taxi Driver, only outweighs this one, and we'll get to Taxi Driver very, very later on, because Taxi Driver in this game is a fucking nightmare as well. But, yeah, no, Paramedic, thankfully, is a little bit easier. As I mentioned, 12 levels to complete, which I believe accounts for 72 patients to rescue, and unlike in GTA 3, there is not 3 reward or 2 rewards when it comes to Paramedic. In GTA 3 you got a health pickup at your hideout, and then eventually also you would get infinite sprint for completing all 12 levels. In this game there is only 1 reward for doing this, and it is infinite sprint, which is incredibly useful in GTA Vice City because Tommy Vercetti can run faster than the average sports car, in all honesty. Yeah, also any ambulance to start, you just have to push it in R3. This is not like Pizza Boy where you have to go to a specific location, get the vehicle to spawn in a specific place so you can do the side mission. This, you can literally just climb into any ambulance and it will assign you the nearest hospital. I believe that's the way this works. Anyways, we will now go ahead and speed this up because we've already sat through 40 minutes of Paramedic before in GTA 3, and in all honesty, the Vice City one isn't quite as hard. Do refer to the GTA 3 video if you want to see sort of the full length of Paramedic, but in all honesty, you should get the basic gist of it through this sped up footage, which we will do now. Okay, now that the ambulance is going mental through its big speedy thing, a few more things I should sort of note. Because of the way there is 4 locations, you might wonder sort of which one's the best. Personally, I do recommend the Ocean Beach location. I haven't just chosen this because it was sort of on the first island and it was the closest to the first safe house. It would seem in theory to me like this would be the best location. I've never done it outside of this location, don't get me wrong. However, just thinking about the other locations, if you decided to start it from the Little Havana, you would probably have to go over to Starfish Island, and also that would encompass the docks, the airport, and all of that is... It's not hard to traverse, but it does take a fair old while to sort of get where you're going in the south of Little Havana. Downtown is an area which is more complicated to traverse than you'd think, because it's a bit bigger than you think in your mind. You think in your mind of downtown, you sort of think, oh, the one road into downtown, and then there's like 3 main streets. But there's also a few extra sections to it, sort of around the back end and the stadium and so on, and I would imagine that would be a bit more complicated to get around to. And then finally, of course, you've got the Vice Point start, which isn't too bad in theory. However, when you start thinking about it, that one, much like Little Havana, actually creeps on you because the way the Vice Point is laid out, there is of course the potential that you'd have to go onto Prawn Island, which does take a while to sort of traverse onto the bridge. It's not too bad from the hospital, but you'd need to be very aware of how things are. Also, a quick thing I should mention in this footage, that is a really horrible pickup point there. Do be careful to not run too many people over for police officers to chase you. As you can see, got slightly nervous there. But anyways, back to my point. If you start in Vice Point, of course, you have to traverse onto Prawn Island, which again, not too bad, but there is only one bridge onto there. And also, the actual location and zone of Vice Point, probably not too bad. However, the big thing I would worry about on the Vice Point section is getting onto the beach. On here in Ocean Beach, it's not too bad because the beach is pretty wide open and there's lots of areas to access. However, getting into the beach on sort of more up the coast is a little bit more awkward because there are bigger hotels in Vice Point that often block off ways onto the beach. I'm still finding, even to this day, trying to access the northeastern part of the beach is quite a nightmare. I usually end up going further south to enter one of the entrances there, which just seems to be the easier way to do it. So I would probably be very wary of starting it up in Vice Point as well. So out of all the locations, Ocean Beach is the one I'd recommend. I'm not just doing it because in theory it's the closest to the safe house, it's because it just does genuinely seem like the best one to do. One thing to point out, much like in Beat the Boy, is it is worth knowing the map before you commit to doing Paramedic. You haven't really got much time on the job to learn how to sort of traverse, so it does help to go in with a basic knowledge of what you are doing beforehand. You know, again, I've played this game for, God, you know, crossing over into a few decades at this point, so, well, 2, but, you know. So I've played this game a hell of a lot. I know roughly what I'm doing and where I'm going, but if it is your first time playing, I would recommend definitely getting accustomed to the way the map works. Particularly, some things worth pointing out is how to traverse the sort of near the lighthouse towards the bottom end of the map, because there's lots of rocks and pitfalls where you can accidentally throw the ambulance into the water, and not only does that fail the side mission, it also ends your life, which isn't particularly good. I should have put an epilepsy warning really on these sirens. But again, I digress. So I would definitely get accustomed to that. Also, start knowing where your entrances onto the beach actually are. They're sort of spread out among the sort of wall into entering the beach. Of course, there's the big main one where you come from the lighthouse, that entrance there. But also along that wall, there's several entrances into it. They are relatively spread out. There's about 5 or 6 entry points, sort of little gates to get in and out of the beach, and it's worth, figuring out roughly where they are. Again, I couldn't tell you by looking on a map exactly where the entrances into that wall into the beach are, but it is worth sort of knowing roughly where they are just in case. Also, one good thing with Ocean Beach worth pointing out as well, these beach-bound patients aren't too bad, because there's essentially nothing around them, so a car won't accidentally run over a patient, which I have seen happen before, and that's very tragic when that happens. There's no one around. Again, there's the risk of running people over, but just be careful to avoid that. Another thing to be careful to avoid, of course, is running over your own patients, because that can happen. I've seen that happen before. It is pretty tragic, so when you are approaching a patient, just be aware of the cars around them, because potentially they could go into them, and be very aware of your speed as well. You sort of get to know how long it takes the ambulance to brake. Of course, like every car in Vice City to my knowledge, none of them have anti-lock brakes, so as soon as you hit the brakes, you're essentially plowing on into a straight line. So again, just sort of control your speed. Again, you've got to keep the ambulance intact anyway from damage, so it's worth sort of modulating your speed, figuring out when the best way to dive in between traffic is, figuring out when the best time to use your sirens is, and so on. So it is worth sort of bearing all of that in mind, if you will. As you can see, we're getting onto the later levels now. This is where the bulk of your time really will be spent. The first few levels are actually pretty easy. They lure you into a false sense of security, really. But the next few levels, sort of, from level 7 onwards, these things get really long. I think level 12 takes about 10-15 minutes to complete, which is quite incredible when you think about it. So this really does feel like it drags on. For whatever reason, it is longer than the GTA 3 one. I'm not sure if it's because Ocean Beach is bigger than I think Vice City's map in general is actually bigger than GTA 3's map, technically, even though there's less islands, of course. Well, there's technically more islands, but they're smaller. Yeah, I guess Ocean Beach might be sort of, in terms of square miles, it might be slightly bigger than Portland. Again, the other thing to bear in mind with the Portland Paramedic as well is I don't think you had to travel as far. Various cases wouldn't take you too far out. As you can see there, again, avoid the water at all costs. As always in these sort of early, well, basically every 3D title that isn't San Andreas, it's always best to avoid the water. I think even in Vice City Stories you drown instantly if you crash into the water in a car, so yeah, definitely avoid the water and all the rest of it. But yeah, no, it's not as bad as it was in GTA 3, in all honesty. Paramedic isn't quite the concern it used to be. It's still not a particularly fun side quest to do. It's still not, again, it's still one of the hardest. However, thankfully they did make it slightly easier. And that was sort of a theme you'd see with these 3D era GTA games. In GTA 3, this was a rock solid challenge. In Vice City, they made it a little bit easier. San Andreas, technically, it's about on par with Vice City. However, there is one particular area in the game which does allow Paramedic to be extremely easy. It still takes about half an hour to complete, but it is a lot easier, because I'll share that when we eventually get to the San Andreas Let's Play, which is coming later this year, trademark. But yeah, no, that should be a lot easier to do. And then of course Liberty City Stories, I can't remember ever actually completing Paramedic in Liberty City Stories. I would imagine it would be sort of Vice City levels with GTA 3's map, but the gangs don't attack you quite as much. That might be worth doing early game though, just so the gangs don't hate you fully. Vice City Stories offered 15 levels, but also checkpoints every 5 levels, which did make it a little bit easier. I think you could also abandon the ambulance in Vice City Stories and then get back into it so it wouldn't like immediately fail you, which I always found it kind of weird that Paramedic immediately failed you as soon as you left the ambulance, unlike say Vigilante, which does allow you to continue. You know, I guess the point of Vigilante is you get out of the car to kill the criminals, but, you know, I always find it a bit strange that they didn't give the same freedom to Paramedic, especially considering you could accidentally click a button and end up in the wrong thing. You might also see I'm accidentally sort of hitting the patients. They take a while to get up, bear that in mind as well, but yeah, as long as you don't kill them, it's not particularly too much of a worry. Again, time limit wise, you can see it's not actually too awful, considering you do get a time bonus for every patient you pick up. I'm getting plus 52 seconds for all of these, so realistically, after picking up 3 patients, you know, you end up with 3 minutes, and the patients, in all due respect, are, you know, 2.5, 3 minutes apart from each other. So, yeah, it is a bit nice that they did make the time limit a little less unreasonable. Another thing worth pointing in mind with Paramedic as well is it's actually quite good for making money in the early game if you can get around to completing it. Don't get me wrong, it's not the quickest way to make money. There is certainly a quicker method, wink wink, but it isn't too bad. I think you end up with about $72,000 by the end of it, which is, yeah, a decent chunk of change, it has to be said. I could be completely wrong on that. I haven't looked at the dollars. I guess we'll wait till the end of this. I think this is level 12. I could be wrong. It's either a level 11 or level 12. I'm trying to pay attention to the footage going on, but again, I really am rambling at this point. Overall, it's easier than it was in GTA 3. It's a little bit more forgiving than it was in GTA 3. It's not quite the hassle it was in GTA 3. However, it's still not fun, it's still not easy, it's still something that you definitely need to be mentally prepared for, shall we say. Again, as I accidentally run over the pedestrian. But yeah, as long as you keep your wits about you, it shouldn't be too bad overall, I guess. I just realised that I forgot to attach a piece of footage together, but also I just looked. The overall reward for this is roughly about $60,000, roughly. I think overall it'd be like $56,000, but I mean, that's a decent chunk of change. It's enough to buy most of the safe houses, which is a requirement for 100%, and yes, that will get its own episode, and yes, that will be the easiest episode in the world to deal with, but yeah, overall, again, Paramedic, not too bad. I guess the money's nice. The infinite sprint is definitely nice. There is no denying that. And it is worth doing. Again, it is a 100% requirement. If you're playing through the game casually, I would probably recommend not doing it. I mean, Pizza Boy, I would recommend to pretty much anyone playing Vice City because it does make the game easier, as I would maybe Vigilante, although using our tactic does kind of take some time. But Paramedic, I mean, if you're not going for the full 100%, there's not really all that much point in doing it, so yeah. Anyways, as you can see, we are now coming up to the final hospital visit. Let them all out, get $15,000 plus $7,200, and now we can sprint forever. And again, as I did previously mentioned, Tommy Vercetti's sprinting capabilities are pretty darn insane, it has to be said. But yeah, as you can see here, I'll just display his actual running speed is actually probably quicker than the acceleration of some of the slower cars in the game. You can run to your own safe house in a matter of minutes, and in fact I will end up showing that now. I guess we'll just keep rambling through this, but yeah. No, definitely happy to get Paramedic out of the way. Do recommend doing it as early as possible if you are going to do it, just because it's easier to do in Ocean Beach. And I guess as well, another issue with doing it on the second island later on is there's potential for certain gangs to hate you and shoot you on sight. Admittedly, they've only got pistols, but it is still something you'd probably be best rather avoiding, considering all you want to do is just get the ambulance to the end, and honestly that's one of the hardest things to do. Anyways, thank you all very much for watching this edition of the Grand Theft Auto Vice City Let's Play. Do hope you've enjoyed. Next time we're going to be taking a look at the unique stunt jumps, so join us for that. Until then, farewell.
You know what I'm saying. The sorrow that my heart holds in, knowing just what my hopes and dreams are. are not part of. I send this letter to your father with love.